Hey guys, Dan here. I'm just going to do a little video showing you guys how to make some reproduction cases for your games. It's a really nice way to organize, and if you don't have the original case, it just makes your collection look a lot nicer. Now, this isn't going to add any value to your collection, so this is only for personal, really, I want my games to look better, so this is what I'm going to do to make my collection look nicer instead of just having a bunch of loose and random games all over the place. Now, these are ones that I've already made it, for the exception of these two. I just happened to pick these up at game stores, and they just happen to have reproduction labels and stuff made on them. The original game, but just the actual cover and everything was custom made. For the most part, I usually do Game Gear and Game Boy games, and a couple of the console games I will be doing in this video, just because I got the loose disc and I didn't have it. Usually for cartridge-based consoles, I don't do a reproduction case on them, just because, you know, with the exception of the Sega Genesis, they weren't really meant to be kept inside of the box. To me, they gave you the instructions, they gave you everything else, but they really just wanted you to just have the cart, and they gave you an end label for a reason, so this way you can just read what your game is. So I have no problem with regular carts being loose, but I do have this one. It's in a Universal game case. So I won't be showing Super Nintendo, but as you can see, it's just the same process, and then you just put it inside of a Universal game case to keep your games in nice and neat. So I'm just going to go over some of these supplies, and then a quick, really down and dirty Photoshop-ish tutorial on how I made a Game Gear cover, and then I'm going to show you the process of prepping, printing, and everything like that. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoy the video. So here's just some of the supplies. A lot of it is optional. You can kind of do your own thing of what you want to do. I have here an X-Acto knife set, so you can use this to finely cut your reprinted labels. Obviously you're going to need to find the labels and print them. I'll show you that later on in the video. A straight edge metal ruler is also optional. If you're going to be using the X-Acto knife, I highly recommend getting a metal straight edge ruler, so this way you can line up your cut and cut right on there. Optional, but I currently don't have, is a cutting mat if you're going to be using this method, like a self-healing cutting mat. You don't really need that, but yet again, these are just things that would make your life a little bit easier. I have here just a regular razor blade for I use this a lot for like modding the cases, like whatever case I have to work with. I usually use a single razor blade to do it. You could also use like a box opener or something like that, but I usually just use my a little razor blade like this, and a little pair of snips. These are wire cutters. You can find them for like 35 cents at like certain hardware stores. You can find it anywhere. And the most optional, because I know it might be a little bit more expensive of an option, instead of getting like a box opener or like a straight edge like an X-Acto knife, is this. I don't really know if you can see it on camera. I'll try to move it so you can kind of see it a little bit better. But a paper cutter. This will definitely obviously replace this, your X-Acto knife and straight edge ruler. I might still use this a little bit, but this will make quicker work of your covers that you are printing. So I'm just going to go show you like what cases I use for each game, so you guys get an idea of what you need to get for your particular system. Okay, so for my Game Gear games, I use a Blu-ray case, just because I know a lot of people use the regular Game Boy, the DS case, game case for it, but you can't fit the instructions in that. But for Blu-ray cases, they fit absolutely perfectly, like it's meant for it. And then I usually put the game right over here. So that's what I use for my Game Gear games. For my Wii and Wii U games, a local pawn shop just happened to have a lot of these white DVD cases, so I picked up a box of these, and it's plenty of space to fit the original disc sleeve and for the other disc. And you see I did that with my Wii U game also. There you go. For PlayStation 2, you can use your standard DVD case, or luckily I had a spare PlayStation 2 game case around, but regular DVD case would work fine. Same thing with Wii and Wii U games. Regular DVD case is fine, but if you can find the colors that go with it, obviously go with that. Whatever your best option is. You have to see what works for your budget too. I just happen to have an extra one laying around. It's got a little crack in the corner, but I really don't care. And then for your Game Boy Advanced and Game Boy games, I have the standard DS case. These are aftermarket ones. These were not made by Nintendo. So their plastic inside is a little bit cheaper. It helps you out with modifying it to actually fit a Game Boy game. But this is what I go with. And these are the games I'm going to be doing tonight. So you're going to make sure you have to make sure you have enough cases for your games and that everything's going to fit properly. Of course, you can, for the CD-based games, you can always use a jewel case or any other like slim DVD case, whatever you're looking for, but this is what I recommend for your games. And if you have any questions about what type of case you should use, always leave a comment down below. I'll help answer that. Okay, now for your Game Gear game case, which is just the standard Blu-ray case, you need to make a few modifications to it before you can go and kind of just use this case. Because you see, if you put your game over here and you try to close it, it does not work. So what you have to do is you have to remove this sphere over here that's the CD holder. So that's where your straight edge razor comes into play. Now be very careful if you feel comfortable with this. Try to find a pair of scissors, apply it or pry these out. But and if you're a kid, try to find an adult to do this for you, because it is a little bit dangerous. You are working with a very sharp blade. So I always just tear it back and forth, and I try to always keep your fingers out of the way of where the razor would go. So right now the razor would go straight. My fingers are not in front of it.
Now, one thing I'd like to say while you're watching this very, very nice time lapse of me struggling is I did not check to see if that new razor blade that I just took out of the retail packaging was actually sharp, and you can kind of see it in this video that it's all pitted and stuff like that, and it wasn't sharp at all, so that's why I was struggling so much. And another thing I'd like to say is if you want to protect the plastic on the back, it's a pretty good idea to put a piece of cardboard back there. So now it's just going to finish up with me.
Just for demonstration purposes, now you can see the game will fit in there perfectly fine. And it should close very nicely, and it keeps the game pretty much in its place just through the pressure of it being pressed up against the plastic. So that's how you modify the Game Gear case. Okay, now for your Game Boy game case, just to let you know, I did get a new razor that's not misshapen. What you're going to need to do for this, basically the premise that you're using is that original DS cases came with a Game Boy Advance game slot, just where you can hold your old games in there. Now, that's great, but you're not fitting your regular Game Boy game in there. It's just not, that's not working. If you're making a case for your Game Boy Advance game, just for example, I have Tie 3. It holds the game perfectly fine, and you have a little spot for your instructions after a little modification right over here. You just cut the top little border lip off. I'll show you that in the video. But for your Game Boy games, they need a little extra modification. So basically what you're going to be doing is you're going to be removing this wall right over here, and you're going to be moving from this border clip down of this case. Also, if you're going to have instructions for your game, you're going to want to remove this piece of plastic right here. And I'm just going to show you maybe a couple more close-ups of me doing this. Hey guys, so I'm going to do my best to try to keep this in frame and demonstrate this to you. So with this particular case, it's quite easy to mod. What I do is I just take my blade here and I cut right at the corner, over here, just like this, and then I snap it down. You might have problems doing that. In that case, you can just use the blade just to cut along the border, but I find it quite easy just to snap it down, and it's not that big of a deal that you're doing this, and it leaves a little hole over here, as you can see, because that's going to get covered up by the cover you made anyway. So I just go over here and I cut out the excess. Good. Now, what I usually do for this to get rid of this part is a little sketchy. You might not want to do it, but just be careful, use the blade properly, and it should be perfectly fine. Yet again, if you don't feel safe like this, you can use other tools like pliers or something like this just to kind of chip away at the plastic, because it's very cheap plastic. So I'm going to start at this border right over here, and we're just going to go straight down with the razor blade. Very good. And then from there, I'm just going to cut the around the edge. So what I like to do is it's not a frame, but I'm using my fingers to hold on to the outside of the case this way it's not on the inside, just in case this blade slips. See, just like that. Now I'm just going to turn a little bit, just for ergonomic sake. I'm just going to make some cuts here on the corners. There we go. And we're going to make a small slice over here. And you can see I'm holding the corners over here, so this way the blade doesn't slip and cut my fingers. I'm trying to keep it as far out of the way as possible. There we go. And then one last border over here. Good. So we have to make one last cut, and that's from here, where we made the initial cut, all the way over to this side. So what I like to do is just try to pre-cut this side as much as possible. Also, this is something you can also use your X-Acto knife for if you don't feel comfortable just using a regular straight razor blade. I know this isn't exactly the safest thing to do in the world. So, now what I actually do over here is I find something heavy and I just cut straight down. There we go. And that is your case modified for a Game Boy game. Now, I'm just going to zoom out here for a second so now you can kind of see. This is all going to get covered up for the with the game case, so you're not going to be able to see it from the outside if that's what you're worried about. So now you can put your game in two ways. Obviously this is the proper way to set it up, but it doesn't sit quite right because the Game Boy Advance games just have this ridges all the way down the side. So if it doesn't bother you, just putting it upside down, it keeps it nice and secure, and it's a better clip on the edges over here. It's just so you don't risk scratching over here at all and keep your game nice and preserved. Now, let's say I had instructions for this game, which I don't for this one, but I do for other ones. What I do is I just make 2 quick cuts right along the edge, just straight down. You can also use snips for this, if that makes you feel more comfortable. Actually, let me show you just me using the snips, just because on camera I don't want to kind of show anything that's like super unsafe. But see, you just get your snips and you cut right over here. Then you just push down and the plastic will snap. I do it for all my games, regardless of whether or not I have the instructions for them or not, because you never know, down the road I go to a gaming convention, they'll have the instructions. I could just pick them up, pop them in my case, close the case, and I'm done. So that's it for case modifications, really. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, I know some people do different things, but I just find this to be super easy as long as you're safe. It's just not that bad. It took me like 5 minutes to do this, not even. And I was doing this on camera, so of course I'm trying to make sure I'm filming everything properly while I'm doing it. So if I'm not on camera, I can do this much quicker. One other quick tip I do recommend if you're worried about cutting the plastic film on the back is if you put a little piece of cardboard behind where you're cutting, you don't really have to worry about the plastic because you can hit the cardboard first. I usually don't cut the plastic, but if you're worried about it, when I started off I did put the cardboard behind, just to be safe. Anyway, continue with the video.
Hey guys, Dan here. So this is the computer part of the getting your game covers and trying to see like what cases work for you and stuff like that. So I use 2 main sources to get my actual covers. First is the Case Project. The Cover Project. It's a really cool website, fan run, obviously. And what they do is they try to get raw scans of the original retail packaging of games, and they make their own covers for it. And it's really a very, very nice layout of a website. As you can see right over here, you have some links to upload to them, find some raw scans if you want to make a cover yourself, things like that. Over here you have your home consoles, and here you have your handheld, and then computer. And they're also very specific too. Like they'll have like Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color. They will. You don't have to look through all the Game Boy games to find everything. Like they even chopped it up by system, which is very nice and much appreciated. Like here they have the Sega 32X Sega CD, so you have to go looking all over the place in like the Sega Genesis section. Just to show you guys a couple of examples, this is always like over here they have like all the new stuff that's come out. So you can see the different types of covers that they have for the games, and you see there's some fan-made ones and some non-fan-made ones. So if you're looking for a cover, obviously it tells you like, okay, this is a custom cover, this is not the original retail packaging, and you can see the difference is they added in these stripes, because you can just tell this is like from the raw scan, and this was actually photoshopped, made to look a little bit nicer. It tells you what format, like, so this is for the North American console, who created it, what region again, and the case type. So this is for a universal game case that they're making this cover for, which is very important because let me show you a game that has multiple game covers. Yep, this one, Sonic the Hedgehog for the Sega Game Gear. As you can see, they have for the DS case, and they also have for universal game case. So you have to make sure when you're downloading these covers what case they are meant for. Usually they'll say right next to it. Another big thing you also want to look out for, I don't know if I can find one, but like you'll find like the DS case for Miss Pac-Man, and then like there might not be for this game. Well, it is for this game. You'll see the 3DS case. You might think, oh, that's not that big of a deal, it's the same case. in all actuality, the 3DS case actually has a thinner spine than a DS case. So if you are using 3DS cases, you have to keep that in mind if you're downloading covers that are DS cases. You're going to have to bring them to Photoshop and make that spine a little bit thinner. One gripe I do have with this website, which isn't really a gripe with this website, it's what people do with Sega Game Gear games, is, it's for Universal Game Case. For the most part, they're for DS cases. You will find Universal Game Case ones, but for the most part, it's for DS cases, which is fine if that's what you want to use, but it doesn't really fit that well in there, and you can't put the manual in there. And I think that the Universal Game Case is overkill for a Sega Game Gear game. It's just way too big. So what I like to do is I go over to Sega Retro, which is not just a fan-run Sega website. It's like a very huge database. It hasn't been updated in a while, so that's a little unfortunate, but it has all of the retro stuff. And the game I'm looking for, which I'll actually bring up over here on the cover project, is The Lion King. This is the game I'm making a case for, and they only have one for the DS, which is fine, but if I was to stretch this out for what I use, which is a Blu-ray case, because it fits everything perfectly, the picture's going to get a little distorted and stuff like that. Meanwhile, if I was over here, I can just search The Lion King, and it brings up the game, and it brings up every single version of the game that came out, so you can scroll through it, see the promotional materials, the Mega Drive version, the Master System version, and then, oh, look, we have the Game Gear version. So, obviously, there's a couple of different scans for each region. Now, unfortunately for this game, they didn't have the spine scan, so I know I have the Majesco one. I mean, not the Majesco, the version software one. So I know this is the correct case because it's the general audience rated version, not the E-rated version. And you can see on the back, here's the cover, and they have very, very nice scans. And usually I take these into Photoshop, even if they have the spine too. I take the spine, and this is my Blu-ray case template that I have. So what I do from here is I put these two. One second, wrong layer. I put these two things on the screen, so this way they're in their appropriate positions. I resize them so this way they're nice and neat. And as you can see, the colors are a little bit off, and there's no spine. So what I do is I make a little selection in between these little areas over here, and I kind of make like my own looking spine, which looks like that. It's just terrible, but this is the magic of Photoshop. You have layers, you can just put that behind, and now it kind of fits in a little bit better. Again, I know this is really jarring looking, and it doesn't look super great, but you have to take into account this is for personal use, and it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. And actually when it prints out, you can't really tell the difference. It's kind of just, I print on usually I've been printing on glossy paper. This time around I'm going to try printer paper because the actual covers themselves have like that plastic glossy thing on it. So I think that's just a waste of money, going to Staples and having it printed on that glossy paper. So I'm going to try regular printer paper this time. I think it's going to come out fine. So that's pretty much how you Photoshop a case together. I know it's not the best Photoshop tutorial, but there are tutorials online on how to use Photoshop, and that's going to take some training. If you have any problems or anything like that with Photoshop, or finding, like, if you don't have Photoshop, you can afford Photoshop, I will link down in the description down below some templates and a web tool that you can use for a free photo editor, which is kind of laid out very similarly to Photoshop. So I can always help you out. I can make a cover for you, or you can just try to make it yourself. Please leave a comment down below if you need any help with anything like that. And that's pretty much it. There's no real other sources for covers unless you just Google like the Lion King cover, but you're gonna get all those VHS things and stuff like that. So one thing to note though, if you can't find the cover on the cover project, please go on the forums. There's a lot of people that have made custom covers and they just haven't made it onto the website yet. Like I needed one for Quirk, right? So they didn't have it on the website. But I found this guy that made it for a 3DS, and all I had to do was resize the spine to my DS case, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. So always check the forums if you can't find it on the website, because that's a very, very good tool for getting these covers. And also post on the forums. You can ask people, like, there's tons of people that put list of games out of what they need, and other people will either try to get them the raw scans or they'll make the covers themselves and post them. So thank you. And I'm going to go over to me hopefully post printing. I'm going to go over to Staples and see if I can get them printed. I've never had any problems, but I know some people have problems saying, like, people that kind of are like, oh, they're claiming copyright, I can't print it there. My suggestion to that would just be leave and come back, or go to a different Staples or something like that. Use a self-help kiosk or something. So thanks. Now you're just going to get a little jump cut.
I was lucky. They didn't give me a single problem. Usually I don't get a problem at Staples. I know some people do, depending on what part of the country you're in. I'm in New York, and they really don't care where I go. They just print it out, no problem. If they do reject you for printing these, just go to another Staples or come back another day, because getting in an argument over this is not really worth it. So I usually try to line it up perfectly on here. And on this paper cutter, it seems that it cuts best when not near this corner over here. I know my hands are just in the way. But when not near this corner, the blade seems to cut its best. So I use the lines that are on the paper cutter itself and my eyes to line up my cut. I'm trying to do this way you can actually see on camera. And I push forward, putting pressure this way on the blade, and I go down. It seems to be the best and most effective way. You can see I barely cut a little bit of the ink off, and it's not that big of a deal if you do. You know, like I said again, this is for your own personal collecting. This isn't for, like, oh, I'm going to make all this money off of making reproduction cases. I honestly think it's the stupidest thing when I see that on eBay and stuff like that. If you made a repro game, like a Star Fox 2 or something, and you're selling it with a case, I think that's absolutely awesome. But if you're selling Pokemon Blue, or you're not even selling Pokemon Blue, but you're just like, oh, I'm going to make a repro case for Pokemon Blue, and I'm going to charge $15. I mean, we all know it costs you $2 to make that case. You know, unless you have like a custom. I know some people have made their own DS style cases that were molded to hold Game Boy games. And that's it. That's your final cut. You know, I don't see any inherent value in being trying to make money off of this. Just enjoy the hobby of collecting. And if you're just doing this just because you bought a game that doesn't have a cart, just disregard what I'm saying. But it's totally not worth it. And that wasn't that lined up that well. That cut was not lined up that well. Let me recut that. Good. Actually, it was lined up perfectly well. It was just the you can see where the ink was. I couldn't see where the line was because it was white. It's a little hard to line up when you have those white borders, but you just kind of use your eyes and estimate. Now, I always use the lines on the board to help me line up my cut. And, you know, I'm like, okay, that's good. You know, it's straight. Go down there and cut. That cut was a little high, but that's perfectly fine.
Okay, so one thing I did want to say is I ended up using regular printer paper at Staples, and they actually turned out really good, and the quality on the print looked a lot better than actually when I used the gloss paper. So I'm definitely switching over to regular printer paper. The gloss paper, the text on it wasn't super sharp. This isn't super sharp either, but it's a little bit better, and it looks a little bit more accurate to the actual game cases that are, real. Obviously you can see around the text area is still a bit of a problem, but it looks really great. All these cases came out really good, and I can't wait to show you guys in the next clip over here, I have a little thing. One thing I did want to say though was you can use just a metal ruler and a straight edge razor, either like a box opener or an X-Acto knife. That's what I used for a very, very long time. But I ended up getting this just to save time. Like I would spend like hours. I'd say I had like 20 cases. I'd spend so long cutting them and then modding the cases this way it'd properly fit. And you don't even have to get a nice one like this. You can even invest in like a $10, $15 one, and it should be great. I just stick with that little trick of putting that pressure in the direction I showed before with that arrow, and your cuts will always come out great. I know at work we use a cheapy one that's like made out of like all plastic, and it cuts great, at least for our schedules. One other thing I'd like to note is if you're not comfortable enough making these cases by yourself and you can't find one on there, I know I said it before in the Photoshop tutorial, but please contact me. I'd be more than happy to either help you make what you want or make it for you. I just felt like a full in-depth Photoshop tutorial would not be worth it because it would be super long, and this is already a very, very long video. So I just showed you like a step-by-step of what I did, and I know the colors didn't look exactly great, but you can see here when I cut it, I don't know if it's passed or not because it's in time-lapse right now, but it looks really similar. Like the colors look great. It's just a little bit smoother. You can tell it was digitally put in that spine, but that's not really that big of a deal because you're looking at each side individually. You're never looking at the whole picture. You're always looking at the side, and it's not very jarring in the difference in quality of the picture, and the colors are very, very similar once they are actually printed. I'm gonna just lay out these cases right now over here, and it should look really, really nice. As you can see, probably the video thumbnail is going to be all these cases laid out, so I'm just going to do a little jump cut to the final product. And voila, we're all done, and I'm just packaging my games now. So you can see I'm just putting Lion King away. One thing I didn't say when I was cutting was it's okay if you cut a little bit extra off the sides, because sometimes in these cases it's a little difficult to get these games in, just because of the way the plastic is. You kind of have to bend it and kind of like, bend the paper to get it in there. So it's not that big of a deal if you cut a little bit off the sides, as long as you don't cut any text off. No one's really gonna know the difference. And I gotta say, these came out looking great. And as you can see with the inside the cases now, they are still looking nice and glossy and not like they're just printed on regular printer paper. Super happy with this quality, and if you have any questions, please ask. Yeah, and so just enjoy the music, whatever it is that I picked out, and watch me package up these games.
Now, of course, your last step is to put them back in with your collection. And as you can see, we have Kingdom Hearts right over here. This is the reproduction one that we made. And honestly, you could barely tell the difference. The only dead giveaway is kind of the back. The printing isn't exact. Like, let me pull over Kingdom Hearts 2 over here. Obviously, this is holographic, but the printing on the fine print is much better than it was on the reproduction one that we did. But that's not really that big of a deal to me. On the shelf, it doesn't look any different. Like that. Would you really be able to tell? Then over here we have Link's Crossbow Training. Fits in perfectly with all the other Wii games. Then we have our Wii Sports right over there. And right next to that is our Bayonetta. Okay, so the only difference I can really see between Bayonetta and the other Wii U games is it's a little bit wider. So it just looks slightly newer. And of course the case isn't that baby blue or that random Mario Party red. Now, for my handheld section over here, that's where I have all my handheld stuff. You know, I'm still trying to organize this a little bit better. But you see how nicely they all look. And then towards the back. Right now I have it organized by system. So I have like Vita in the front because I don't have that many Vita. And these are all the other, all the Game Boy ones are obviously repro ones, and the DS ones are all the original except for Custom Robo Arena. I had to make a Custom Robo Arena one because I only got the game cart for it. And then of course here's my Game Gear section. So you can see this is very different, but you can see just right here in alphabetical order. There we go, we have the Lion King. The spine is a little bit difficult to read. It shows up a lot, it looks a lot better in person than it does on camera, but as you can see, I try to make good spines for all the cases I've done. See, this one was a resized one from the cover project, as was this one, because this was done in a Universal game case. But this was from Sega Retro, and this is just the original packaging, along with, here we go, Castle of Illusion. So, thank you guys for watching, and if you like this video, please leave a comment down below. If you didn't like the video, please dislike the video. And if you have any game case that you need help making, I promise I will do a better job than I did with the Lion King. That was for my own personal use. I can help you out on Photoshop if you need. So thank you guys, and subscribe if you like the video.